The new look Pitt Panthers were in action today. Pitt suffering a 65-62 loss to North Carolina State, a game that Pitt trailed by a significant amount early on, but certainly made it a game at the end, pulling to within three there, but falling to the Wolfpack as Pitt now moves under 500 at 9-10. But as I said, a new look Pitt Panther team after tons of controversy and a couple key players leaving the program earlier in the week. Pitt bounces back, plays okay, but not good enough for the victory on this day. This is another edition of Pitt Postgame here on Pittsburgh Postgame's edition of Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I am joined by Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now. Alan, Pitt trailed by as much as 10 throughout this game. I kind of thought we were going to have a game that North Carolina would pull away and be a little bit of a boring showing in that first half, but Pitt certainly made it a game at the end. They doubled up the rebounding. They were solid on the glass. They end up losing by 3. Sibande ends up with a solid outing in terms of his scoring there at the end, even maybe liking a little bit more of efficiency from him, though. But this is a new Pitt Panther team. They lose Xavier Johnson. They lose Toney earlier in the week. You and Mike touched on it in a couple of videos here on this channel. So subscribe to the channel and find those videos over there in the Pitt Panther talk section here on PSL. Obviously, a new look team, a new look lineup. They've been reeling based on the news this week. What did you make of this game? How did you think this team looked? And I also want to ask you, what were you expecting to see in this game? What were you looking for in this game with such a new lineup and a new Pitt team? Because to refresh the memory, Xavier Johnson, 15-14, had a 30-point outing less than a month ago, an integral player for Pitt, leaving the program. Toney also a big part of the team this year, and he ends up leaving. And that's a big change for this Pitt team that still showed up, only losing by 3.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a totally different team without Johnson and Toney. And, it really makes, putting the focus on Justin Sibande obvious from a game plan perspective. So, I mean, I think without those two guys, you're going to see even more defensive attention on him. And so it's going to be incumbent on other guys to step up. And I thought Pitt found a little bit of that tonight. I'm not sure I expected them to. I figured this for like a 20-point loss. I'll be honest. I didn't think they were going to be able to score even as much as they did. Obviously not a very high scoring game, but I thought Femi Odukale looked good at the point. He ran the offense pretty well. I thought they defended very well throughout, especially considering like Helms and Funderbunk. That's like a good, kind of forward combination for NC State, and Pitt's not really super well designed to combat that without Toney in the lineup, and I feel like he did a pretty good job. Like I mean, Will Jeffress is a guy that's going to have to play better than he did, but he got his real first significant ACC playing time, and he looked okay. I thought Terrell Brown stepped up. Like I don't know. There's not a lot of reason to have like optimism about where Pitt is right now. Like they're not a very good basketball team, but I think that was perhaps not as bad as I expected.
And you mentioned that you were expecting maybe a 20-point loss. It looked like we were headed there maybe in that first half. What do you think caused the turnaround for Pitt? Because again, Sibande was able to turn it on, ending up with 15 points, only 4 for 14 as I bring up efficiency. But Pitt was able to turn this game around. They were able to get over 40 in terms of rebounding. They were able to do some things that Jeff Capel normally likes to see out of his team, even though they still dealt with some foul trouble. But what did Pitt do differently in that second half to make this a game that they almost were able to steal and get a victory?
Well, they made shots, and they didn't make any shots in the first half, but I think they also got better shots than they did in the first half. I thought they ran the offense better. That backup point guard, he doesn't get a lot of practice time. And yeah, Pitt had 7 days off in between games, but Femi Odukale is still a freshman. And
right.
So I just think it took them a little bit of time to start to get that offense into a rhythm with a new point guard. And yeah, they made shots, but and look, they missed some layups in the first half too. Let's not excuse that. But I just felt like the offense flowed better in the second half. They got better looks. They were able to do some things to find Sibande, even though everybody in the world knew he was going to be the focus of the offense. They were still able to get him free. I thought Nike Sibande looked really good in a wing slasher role. Like, I'm not saying this is a good performance. Like, losing to NC State's bad, but considering what has just happened to this team, especially the way things, and that's another thing that this team has shown all year, and it was still there tonight, is that they've fought in every single game, win or lose. They've been in every game late against good teams, great teams, doesn't matter. And even after losing Johnson and Toney, it doesn't seem like that changed. They go down 10 points. They're down 10 at the half. They fought back in the second half, made it a very close game down the stretch, and, put themselves in a position to possibly win the game.
Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now. This is a Pitt Hoops edition here of Pittsburgh Postgame on PSL. Mike Asti guiding you through the recap of Pitt's 65-62 loss to North Carolina State. This does pull Pitt's regular season overall record to 9-10, so now under 500, while the Wolfpack are 12-9, as Pitt kind of rounds out and putters away their regular season after dealing with controversy this week and dealing with key players leaving the program. So a new look Pitt team that maybe some wanted to see show up and perform and show they had heart, and I think we at least got that, even though it wasn't a victory and a game that normally you'd want to win and expect to win. But with everything Pitt dealt with, I don't think those expectations were certainly there entering this game. Now, Alan, you mentioned Pitt hitting shots in the second half. You mentioned kind of liking the flow of the offense a little bit more. But the one thing that seemed to be the same, and this also was mentioned on the broadcast, with everything changing, the one thing that's been the same for Pitt all year, and Jeff Capel even talked about this, is struggling to close games. I mean, Pitt, once again, they pulled it to right there throughout the end of this game. They end up losing by 3. They had a chance to tie this game throughout those final minutes. Champagny does deal with foul trouble, and they hit shots in that second half, but it doesn't remain as consistent in those final minutes. What is the deal this season? Is it something that can be corrected? What do you think is going on that Pitt just plays well in second halves of games, but then that final minute and a half, it's a Pitt team that seemingly can't either complete the comeback or struggle to close games when they're trying to close those games? And it's now been a problem for a month and a half, with or without Xavier Johnson, with or without Toney. That's the issue that still reared its ugly head here today. Again,
I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is they keep going down 10 to 15 points and then having to come back.
Right.
Like, I mean, if you're down 10 to 15 points, you should not expect to be winning those games. Like, sure. it is a credit to this team that they keep fighting and they get themselves close, but you're not going to win too many games where you're down 10, 15 points at the half. You're just not. That's not the way the game is played. And so I don't think the big problem is that they can't finish these games where they're to one possession with a minute and a half left and they need somebody to miss some foul shots or turn the ball over when they, like, that's all NC State did. They didn't turn the ball over and they made most of their free throws, and Pitt didn't have a chance to win the game because of it. You can't get yourself in a position where you need the other team to make mistakes in order for you to win. You got to get into a position where you can dictate who wins or who loses based on your play. And Pitt, unfortunately for them, did that in the first half when they dictated their own loss by shooting 20-something% from the floor. I mean, that's where the game is lost. The fact that they keep coming back, I really do think is a credit to them. And I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of when you're losing by 10 and lose by 3. It's just that you can't be losing by 10 every single game. And that has been something that has happened night in and night out for this team, is they just dig too deep of a hole for themselves. And they're not a particularly talented shooting team. I mean, there's some teams out there where like a 10-point deficit can go by 1, 2, 3, go hit a couple threes and then it's gone. This is not that Pitt team. They're not going to go shoot lights out, especially not from 3. They don't have one particularly dangerous 3-point shooter, let alone more than one. So that they know they're going to have to work hard and beat people possession after possession to come back from deficits. They've got to find a way to stop getting into them.
They do. And as you mentioned, Pitt trails 31-21 after the first half. 41-34 outscore North Carolina State in that second half, but not good enough for the victory as they lose 65-62. They absolutely dug themselves a hole. I don't think it was a hole that anyone was surprised to be watching after everything that Pitt had dealt with this year, and having this be a new lineup with a lot of players getting production in this game or getting minutes that prior would not have been, and Toney and Xavier Johnson not there. But again, too little, too late. The comeback ends up floundering and Pitt losing this one. Now, you mentioned some contributions from some players, Alan, that wouldn't normally be able to give these type of contributions if Xavier Johnson was, say, still there. And this got some commentary also on the broadcast. Champagny cannot do it alone. He's had to dominate some games earlier in the year. His domination of these 20-plus point double-doubles, triple-doubles haven't been as plentiful in the second half of the season that they were maybe back in December. He still ends up with 15 in this game and a double-double with 12 boards. But what did you see from the rest of Pitt's lineup? Do you see somebody else that can kind of take the reins for Xavier, Johnson, and Toney as that second and third guy offensively for this Pitt team moving forward? Because that seemed to be something that maybe is a bright spot in this game, that there was significant production from others that stepped up that otherwise would not have had the opportunity.
Yeah, I think Femi Odukale scores 18 points in this. 6 of 11 shooting, did a lot of getting to the rim, 5 of 7 from the free throw line, which has been an issue for him all year. And so I really think that he was a significant contributor in this one. I'm not sure what happened with Xavier Horton. He didn't play very much in this game, and I'm not sure why. He's their best three-point shooter. Just played 18 minutes and had 1 point. I would have expected more from him. I think Nike Sibande this is 2 straight games that have been really strong for him. Played 38 minutes, only gets 9 points. He's playing better defense than he was when he got minutes earlier in the year. I think that's why he's getting more playing time right now. Also picks up 5 rebounds. He's not that big of a guy, but he seems to have a nose for the basketball. And then Terrell Brown was really good offensively. He's not the best defensive forward in the league. He's going to get beat up on by some of the more physical guys. But I think if he plays 30 minutes and gives you 11 points, 11 rebounds, you're going to take that every time. So, listen, is Odukale, Champagny, Brown a successful, top 3 scoring group? I don't know. It seems like Odukale fits there. I don't know if Terrell Brown's going to be able to do that night in, night out. I think I'd rather see an Xavier Horton or a Sibande step up. I don't know what happened to Horton at all. Sibande can do a little bit more than he did tonight, especially maybe from 3-point range where he was 1 for 4. Just maybe, 3 for 5 instead of 1 for 4, I think totally changes the game for him and for the team, so that they still need that 3-point shooting. I don't know if it's on the roster or not, but he's the guy that I think has the most opportunity there. And Horton, I don't know what happened there. Jeffress and Collier are young forwards that are developing. Jeffress is extremely young. Collier is, still, I think, kind of growing into his frame. He's a little bit bigger, but he's not quite as physical as other guys his size. I think those guys need time. I'm not sure I'm going to be expecting them to be scoring a ton the rest of the season. I think they'll just use these minutes to develop and hopefully we see a little bit more than we did out of them today, but I'm not expecting them to take that big jump into like a 10 to 15 point scoring role at any point this season.
Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now. Mike Asti here on the Pitt Hoops edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Smash that subscribe button. I see some of you watching. I see some of you liking. If you don't already subscribe, do so. It's free to do so, and will help us get all of our content to you as easy as possible. 65-62, Pitt losers to North Carolina State. As not only does Pitt lose this game, but Pitt fans get teased by those Bojangles advertisements there near the backboard. I know that made me want some Bojangles, and you got to get down south to be able to enjoy that. So that's another kind of kick in the you-know-where for Pitt fans watching this or Pitt media trying to cover. I definitely want some Bojangles in my life. The new look Pitt Panthers, some bright spots, some things to have concern. I think Odukale getting the 18 is nice for sure. I think that's a big piece. I also think it's interesting that Pitt puts up 17 bench points in a game. They only score 62 overall points with Toney and Johnson both not in this lineup, obviously, for leaving the program. And one of them sometimes has been on the bench. Johnson has been on the bench and produced 14, which would have been 14 out of 17 in this game when he's been there. So they do 17 bench points without either one of those on the bench. That's maybe a bright spot to see as well. But Alan, before we get to what to expect the rest of this season, before we even get to anything about the future of this program, which again, you and Mike touched on multiple videos here already on the channel of Pittsburgh Sports Live with your instant reactions of Johnson and Toney leaving the program. I almost kind of found it funny. You and Mike touched on Xavier Johnson leaving, and then surprise, surprise, we need another video because Toney also bounces 24 hours later. So you guys killed it there. So I'm not going to have to touch on it too much here, but what I do want to ask you, the last time you and I were doing a post-game show where Pitt was riding high and their fans were excited and it was one that we were getting tons of traction on. It was not that long ago. We're talking about January 19th, Pitt with a big statement win over Duke. You and I on this post-game show, and that caught fire. Since then, I don't know what went on. Our luck, the luck of the team, it did not continue. Pitt winning one game in their next, I believe, 8 after that, including several losses now in a row. You see Xavier Johnson leave the program. You see Toney leave the program. You deal with the pandemic again. And the season had just completely flipped on its head to really be kind of ruined. People were talking about Pitt having a chance at the NCAA tournament after that Duke win. Duke is not a team that has impressed anybody since then either. It is the worst Duke team arguably in the last 30 years, but still a statement win with the talent on that Duke team. In your estimation, as somebody watching all these games, covering this team and been doing so for a while, I guess to put it bluntly, what the hell happened? What the hell happened to have this season be ruined, to have that game and what we were discussing in that post-game show look kind of ridiculous in retrospect?
Well, I think that it's all kind of connected, right? I just feel like this was a team that did not fit together. I don't think you saw guys on the same page. I don't think you saw a coordinated effort at times. And look, we talked to Adi's Toney after that Virginia Tech win on February 3rd, and he said, look, the leaders of this team came together, and it felt like that was kind of a thing where they were going to stop the slide. And look, they play against Virginia the next game. I don't know, no harm in losing. It was a relatively close game at Virginia, and then they go out and lose to Georgia Tech and NC State. And so, I just think it's a team that did not play particularly well together. I think that's why it's not together anymore. I don't think, the sum of the parts were greater than the individuals. They did not make each other better. And so that's why we are where we are. And I think that's why the team is not together anymore either, with Johnson and Toney leaving, is that, you had some conflict there within the team. And I it is now clear to me that you saw that on the court. It was not just stuff that happened off the court, is that it was not a team that was running smoothly. And I think people can point the finger at Jeff Capel for some of that, but I also have to say, look, I mean, Toney and Johnson and Trey McGowan's came into this program when it was nothing. They were thrust into big roles as very young players, probably got more attention early in their career than they should have or were ready for. And, these are the things that happen when you're trying to rebuild from an 0-18 season. I don't think if this next class of recruits that comes through the Pitt program flames out in similarly spectacular fashion, well, then I think we can call Jeff Capel a poor judge of character. But I think at this point, that first class, you can't be disappointed with the way those 3 careers ended, even though they end after 2 and 7/8 seasons with the Panthers, still largely better than you expected out of those 3 players that came into a program that had literally nothing. And so I think it certainly tempers some of the optimism around the Jeff Capel hire and should. I mean, I think people got a little bit ahead of themselves about how good this team could be quickly. But I still think you have to have a lot of faith in a man that was able to have Pitt's best recruiting class in 6 years and 6 months on the job. He's found players like Justin Champagnie and Xavier Johnson, who were 3-star recruits. Femi Odukale certainly looks like another player that was a 3-star recruit and is going to be a potential all-league kind of player. And if he continues to do that and he's able to do a little bit better job of weeding through the personalities and getting some players that are a bit more committed to the team focus instead of individual focus, then they'll do even better.
Do you feel that the slide for Pitt and the decline and how this kind of team did fall apart after that statement went over Duke? They did pick it up there in that Virginia Tech game, but then it just wasn't enough. And Virginia, Louisville, Georgia Tech, NC State, Florida State, and NC State again, all being losses since. did that lead to Xavier Johnson and Toney's departure, or do you? I mean, obviously, we don't know. We're not in their head. Jeff Capel's not going to tell us exactly what was discussed personally between him, the family, and those players. But or was that maybe something that was in there prior, and the seat in the slide just coincided? Because it just, again, as much as everything you're saying is very, very true and very, very accurate, the team did play together right before all that began. The Duke win, right before that, was a win over Syracuse. They had those couple games dashed because of COVID, but even a win prior to that against Syracuse, and it looked like Pitt was very much playing together, where some were even arguing if you scrap the Louisville game where they slept through and lost by 10, they had a really solid team. And we were even joking the St. Francis game was funny and was a joke, and team had been much better since then, and it'll just be a laugher. Well, they once again puttered away the season, and Jeff Capel's obviously not going anywhere. But is it fair that to say that he maybe lost this team and in turn lost these players, or was the departure of these players going to happen anyway? And maybe he was having this team play above themselves when they were a potential bubble team in the tournament.
I think it's kind of the other way around. I think it's that the symptoms, those are both symptoms of the same illness. When you have a team that does not play for each other, that is not focused on winning, and is not dedicated to winning above all costs, then you're going to get inconsistent performances. And then when you get inconsistent performances, you lose some games you shouldn't lose. Like that game at Wake Forest, they shouldn't have lost. The home game where they get blown out against Notre Dame. I'm not going to say they can't lose to Notre Dame, but they shouldn't have lost to Notre Dame by, what was it, like 25 points. I mean, that should never happen.
84-58. Yep.
Yeah. And then, so when you already got some guys that are not committed to the team concept, and then things start to go badly, it all unravels. The same thing happened in the last 2 seasons at Pitt, where things looked promising at a midpoint of the season, only for them to go horrifically bad down the stretch. And I think those are all symptoms of the same problem, is that you just had guys that were not bought into a team concept, that were not bought into winning here at Pitt with one another. You know, I don't necessarily think it was I don't like Jeff Capel. I don't like what he's saying. I don't like what he's doing. I think it was just an each other thing at the end of the day.
Okay.
And so I just think Pitt had pieces that weren't going to work together. And I don't know. Maybe Jeff Capel could have done more to get more out of them. So, I mean, we'll never know that answer for sure. But they certainly it doesn't seem like it was going to be a problem that was going to get better either.
Okay, so you don't feel this will be 20 years from now, like the Fab Five, where they cry how each other are closer than blood brothers and love playing with each other. That's not going to be the case for this group of Pitt Panthers. Those are some big words, though, because that is an indictment of the Pitt players. That is an indictment of the Pitt leadership. Champagnie has certainly become a player that I don't think anyone expected to be this great, and has really emerged. People were talking about him as one of the better players in the conference, if not the country, just a few months ago. He's had some big games, but around him, he certainly needs more help. He does even need to be more efficient. And it appears the Pitt leadership let him down, let the team down. It'll be interesting, though, if any of this eventually has the buck stop at Jeff Capel, because what you're saying is this is now several years of this occurring, and he did have a recruiting class in which these players played better individually than some would have expected. But part of recruiting in college sports is also recruiting for the team collective and to be able to win, or else you're not going to be able to actually be there to have the fruits of that labor. What is the leash for Jeff Capel? Can Pitt handle? I mean, obviously he's not going to be fired right now. Obviously, we all know that. And the fanfare was there when he was hired, even by opposing fans and media, thinking it was a great hire for Pitt. But how much longer does that go with the leash? If he has another year where Champagnie has a great December, then is less efficient, the team collapses, they don't get in the tournament again, another year next year like that, year after that, eventually, are the fans and media going to turn on him, and will Pitt eventually have to think about actually firing a man who they had so much promise for if this keeps on happening?
Well, first of all, I think it's putting the cart way before the horse to assume that Justin Champagnie will be back.
Sure.
I would assume
it can't happen with COVID, though. It can definitely happen.
I would assume that he would not be. I mean,
okay.
He's getting talked about in the second round of the NBA draft. To me, I think that is a fairly a no-brainer decision if that's where you're getting discussed. Okay. And so, I would assume that he is not back. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about
Well,
it.
then next year could be a really poor year then. If he's not back, this could really be a major step back.
It could be, but that also means there's 6 open scholarships. So,
Right.
I mean, it's just about what Jeff Capel could do to bring in new talent to the team. And that is what Jeff Capel was brought here to do. I mean, he made his money as an assistant coach and as a head coach, as a recruiter and as a developer of talent. And so that's what he's going to have to do. He's done it already at Pitt. He got that class, that first class recruiting on nothing, and no track record of any success. Worst team in all major conference college basketball.
He took over where the cupboard was very bare and Pitt was a laughing stock on it.
He gets Justin Champagny as a 3-star kid. He gets Femi Odukale as a 3-star kid. Well, you recruited John Hughley. That didn't work out, but that was still a huge recruiting win for that program. Will Jeffress is another 4-star guy.
Right.
So I think he can get talent. You give him 6. He doesn't have anybody committed right now. I don't think that's a big deal. There's a lot of guys that are out there still waiting to see what's happening. If they're going to open recruiting this summer, there's going to be seniors playing AAU basketball, which is a big deal because that doesn't usually happen because the coaches haven't seen them yet. Right. And so there's way more talent out there than there usually is this time of year. Plus, with the one-time transfer rule likely to go through, the transfer portal is going to be insane. And so it should not be a huge task to get some talented players into Pitt to add to what he's already got here. And look, if he can compete with an NC State with this lineup right here, right now, and add to it, then listen, I think that seems pretty optimistic to me that if what's left of this Pitt team right now can do that to NC State, then they should feel like they should go and be able to go into next year at or above that level. And I think that's a reasonable place to be for Pitt entering the 4th season under Jeff Capel.
I do think the way Pitt played in this game, especially coming back from a sluggish start and almost winning this game after everything Pitt dealt with this week, is a positive. I really don't think anyone can be too hard on this group of Pitt Panthers with everything they dealt with and how they played in this game. I think Capel probably secretly would like it as well. Who knows about the future, though? That is an interesting point, absolutely, about Justin Champagny probably not being back. If he can get a second-round draft slot in the NBA, it's impossible to turn that down, although you would love to see him another year in college basketball to get a little bit more efficient, maybe get some more size, be even better than he's been so far after emerging this year. Another year under Capel could do him wonders, but he probably can't turn down the opportunity, and it will be a question mark, the future of this team. But some players stepped up in this game. Pitt played together in this game. They showed heart in this game as they have all year. And many other programs maybe wouldn't have had that situation occur, especially with a team that hadn't played together in so long. The adversity actually put this team more together than ever before. And Champagny can choose to stay with the COVID rules. So we'll see. I mean, that can happen. He can be back, but maybe probably not likely. Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now, Mike Asti here on the Pitt Hoops Edition, the post-game show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Pitt losing 65-62. There's a couple games left in the regular season. Obviously, Pitt losing. Xavier Johnson and Toney still probably going to be the conversation the rest of the way. Alan, as we kind of round things out, what do you expect to see the rest of the season for Pitt? And wins and losses don't really matter right now. So what are you watching for the rest of the season as Pitt ends this season, this tumultuous season that at one point had some hope? Hope's not there right now, but a lot of question marks around this team and around this program, even around maybe Jeff Capel. So what are you watching for to maybe try to get some answers and have a hypothesis moving forward for the program?
Yeah, I think it's a continued development of those players that that are clearly not ready, right? I mean, I think you see Will Jefferson, you see Noah Collier, that they're clearly not ready yet, but they're going to get opportunities that they maybe don't necessarily deserve at this point in their career, but they're going to get opportunities to show that development on the field right now. And I think that matters for them individually if they can use these last few games as a springboard in the next season. And if they're going to have to be in the starting lineup, then they're going to have to play a little bit better. They're going to have to play a lot better. And so that's really an important thing to watch here down the stretch. And, I think Femi Odukale has been really good when he's been called upon to be the point guard. I expect him to continue to do that. But there's some more parts of his game that we'd like to see. And then there's some guys with decisions to make here. Sibande and Brown are the fourth-year guys that could come back if they want to. I'm sure that Jeff Capel would like to have as much talent as he can, but I'm not sure if either of those guys are in his plans. Brown put on the show today. He looked really good. Sibande has been good in 2 straight games. If you'd have asked me 2 months ago, I'd say there'd be no chance those guys would be back. But now, maybe they will be. And so that's another thing that I think is very interesting. And the last thing is, I think the biggest part is that they've got to stay together. And I think they did that tonight. They did it under a decent amount of adversity. They're going to have to continue to do that. If this is a team that kind of falls apart internally even further, that's going to be a discouraging sign.
I think another reason why I'd love to see Champagnie come back is because the sophomore really looked like a leader in this game, maybe more than he has this entire season. This adversity might actually have forced him to become really a leader for this Pitt team, being so young, losing Toney, losing Xavier Johnson, the previous leaders of this team, the older statesmen of this team. If you get another year of Champagnie as the leader in his junior year with this Pitt group, if a couple do come back because of COVID, that would be a plus, certainly. Probably not going to happen, but he really seemed to step up and galvanize the troops in this second half that almost became a comeback for Pitt. Pitt loses 65-62 to North Carolina State. The Wolfpack now 12-9, Pitt now 9-10 on the year. They have a couple more left, some adversity they've been dealing with, to say the least, but they did come together, almost came back and got the victory. Nothing doing, though, as Pitt suffers another loss to the Wolfpack. Make sure to hit up Pittsburgh Sports now for the post-game reaction and post-game coverage of this very game. Of course, all throughout the week as well, covering Pitt athletics. And make sure to subscribe to this very channel here for more post-game shows, more content in general, more post-game reaction, more videos from coaches and players, and my Mike Trupp show as well here. All on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and it is free to hit that subscribe button and get that. And I then am going to head upstairs from my home studio to enjoy what is smelling like some homemade potato soup. So that's going to be a win for me here as we close up this chapter for the Pitt Panthers. Honestly, they overcame a lot of adversity and they played their heart out, but not enough as Pitt loses North Carolina State 65-62, closing out a roller coaster ride of a week for the Pitt Panthers.